So we are starting on the nose today, finishing with the mouth. We should get through the whole thing. If we don't by chance, like if we get like 3/4 through the mouth or something, again, the video will be posted tomorrow. I'll just continue recording after class ends. And then the full video will be posted so that you can finish it up tomorrow and then do a second one of each. So for the nose, if you do have the step-by-step sheet pulled up, it will look like this. So it has all the steps. It walks you along, and I'll kind of explain what each of those parts that we draw are. So for the nose, you want to start with the tip of your nose, so the ball of the nose at the very tip. So we're just going to draw a small circle. Remember, when you're drawing any of these lines, you're drawing them very lightly and loosely, so you don't want to try and draw a perfect circle because we're going to be erasing or at least shading over this anyways. So you don't want it so dark that either one, you can't erase it, or two, you can't shade over it. Now, what this circle determines is what that end of your nose looks like. So I'm just doing like a generic one. I'm basically just following how it looks in the step-by-step. But when it comes to your project, this is the part that you adjust to determine what the tip looks like. So if you have a very pointy nose, this will be smaller. If your nose is more broad, it'll be wider or even more of an oval shape. And okay, you can hear me now? Okay. And if it's just kind of average normal, then it's just a circle. All right, so next thing you're going to do is draw the bridge of the nose. So you're just going to bring lines up from that circle. This is another part you can adjust depending on your nose. So if your bridge is a little wider, mine kind of is at the top here. So if I were drawing my nose, I would probably go out at the top a little bit. But this is just, again, a generic one. So just 2 lines coming up from the tip. Next, we're going to draw a light line going through the center of that circle and coming out on both sides. And I'll explain in a moment why all these lines are needed. They help you avoid a lot of not realistic nose drawing. Then we're going to come down from about halfway down the bridge here and then curve it and do that on both sides as equally as you can get it. And then for the nostril part, you're going to follow along the bottom of the circle here and then come up to this line and then just kind of trail it off, like kind of like flick your pencil so that it just makes a quick little line there. Other side too. And the last part of the lines for the sides here, you're going to bring it past that line and then around. And you can see we didn't meet these. There's a gap there. And then do the other side too. And you can tell already this nose looks a lot more 3D than if what I see a lot of people do is they just try to draw this whole part all in one. So they might do like the side of the nose, they might come up, do the tip, come up, and then around. I'm sure a lot of people do that. If you do, you're not alone. This still helps you avoid that because you're building off all the parts. So don't do that, because then you've got essentially a nose that's not connected to your face because there's nothing going on here where there's that piece of kind of skin connecting to your actual face. So it's not realistic. So make sure you always start off with those building lines and then move on to kind of these lines here. And it'll help you avoid doing a nose like this. All right, and technically I did kind of jump ahead and do those lines. I tend to do that just to get the outlines done. But next what we're gonna do is shade along the bridge. So you're just going to do darkest along the bridge itself. You're going to shade along the form of that end there. Come back up. Then just kind of keep going back and forth, getting lighter as you go toward the center. You notice I'm holding my pencil at an angle. Remember, that's so that you're getting more of the surface area of the tip of the pencil rather than like the very tip or even the edge of the tip. You're getting like the side of it. Just try your best to hold it at an angle as much as you can. Makes shading a lot easier. Then we're going to move the shading outward. So up here at the top, again, shade dark to light. And the other side too. And now we're going to start bringing the shading kind of further out. So we're going to start along the sides of the nose here. Come in a little bit right here, and then go toward the center. Shade just a little bit along the top of the nostril. And then just kind of some medium shading around here, but leave a little bit of a highlight there because that part's pretty rounded and usually it has a highlight that hits it. Then you'll just do the same to the other side. Sometimes I like to lighten these lines a little bit because not everybody's go all the way up there. You can shade a little bit down right here. And then the last thing on this part of the nose, we want to round out the tip of the nose a little bit. So we're gonna push the values a little bit right here. It's almost like we're trying to create a sphere. So we're moving along that form of the sphere at the tip of your nose and then just kind of blending out the bridge. By blending, I just mean fading out the values. When it comes to actually blending the pencil itself, don't do anything with that yet. We will go over different materials you can use to do that later on. Actually, we did, but like in terms of using it on your portrait. Now the outside here, you are gonna still shade. Start a little bit dark right here, but then everything to the right and left of your nose on the nostrils should be lighter than that edge that you created. And if you ever feel like you made something too dark, I didn't, but I'm just gonna do this anyway. Whether it's like the eraser on the end of your pencil or an actual eraser, you can always just kind of tap at it and it'll lift a little bit of the value. Or if you need a little bit more, push harder or just kind of like swipe at it. That way you're not completely erasing it, you're just taking layers off. All right, next is the actual inside. So we're going to put a pretty dark shadow here. And then fade it out as you go down. So we're showing that this is going inside of our face, essentially. And same on the other side. Good thing about the nose and the mouth is they're mostly symmetrical, so whatever you do on one side, you do on the other too. And you can go in here and just delineate that nostril line one more time, since sometimes when you're shading, it gets lost in all that shading. Remember, it doesn't meet with the edge, so you don't want it to. And the last part is just the shading that is under the nose. So we're gonna shade a little bit of a shadow here. Leave a tiny bit of a highlight right under there. This is actually where like that Cupid's bow is, right above your lip. So we're gonna kind of pretend that that's there. And then same on the other side. And then you are done with the nose. And let me know in the chat how you think you did on that. Do you think you did great? Do you think you did okay? Or you're just still kind of getting the hang of it? Okay, so it sounds like you're doing okay, good. Okay. Remember, tomorrow you'll have more practice, so hopefully that helps too. All right, next we are moving on to the mouth. Let me try and get this a little closer. Okay, so remember there is that whole step-by-step that you can follow along with too. That's on today's post, it'll also be on tomorrow's, and it will just look like this, so all the steps. Now when we start with the mouth, we want to start with the midline. The midline is the middle line where your two lips meet. So you don't draw the outline first, because then what tends to happen is you end up with just kind of cartoonish looking lips rather than a nice drawing. So for that midline, you start low, you go up, down, up. Ooh, let me kind of do that again. Down, up, and then back down. Try and make it as symmetrical as you can. Some people's are more straight, some are curvier like this, some are maybe even pointed downward, but again, we're just doing kind of a generic one. Next, you're going to do that little bend at the top. Same as kind of the midline. People's are all different. Some it's very shallow, some it's very pointy, some it's very just kind of average like this. Then we're gonna create just a little bit of a scoop for the bottom lip. Now keep in mind your top lip should be smaller than your bottom lip, at least by a little bit. So just do a little curve there. Don't connect it yet. You can also do a tiny little light line right here that'll help us later on with the shading. All right, for anyone who did come in late, just keep in mind this video will be posted tomorrow. So if you missed the nose or if you missed part of the mouth or whatever, you just need a review. Tomorrow during asynchronous time, you can watch through the video. All right, now we're going to connect this. Now you're not going to come straight down because then you'll have a very pointy point there. You want to first curve up and then come down. And again, curve up and then come down. And then this bottom one, you don't want to bring it all the way to the line. You just want to do it kind of lightly. Sketch up to the right and then sketch up to the left. And with any lines where you're trying to make like a perfect line, you don't want to like press your pencil and try to get that perfect line. You want to kind of sketch it out. So you can do these small little kind of streaks of pencil until you form your line. Okay, next we're gonna lay out a base layer of shadows. Now keep in mind if I'm going a little quickly, it's just so I can get the video done. Then tomorrow you can always catch up on parts you missed. So in the corner, we're going to have this little, I just call it kind of like a little pinch shadow. It's just that little, like, I don't know how to, like almost like a dimple, but it's not. It's just where your mouth meets. You'll do that on both sides. And then you're going to shade along the midline. Now I'm going to shade in those base shadows. Now if you have the step-by-step pulled up, it's the third box. And we're just blocking in the shadows first. So on the top lip, you kind of follow along that line, and then the corners have a little bit more shading than the rest. On the bottom, again, from the corner, it has a little bit more. Then it kind of tapers down. Now, one thing I want you to pay attention to is you don't necessarily want it to touch this line. So let me erase some of my sketchy lines to leave some space. There is a little bit of a highlight at the bottom. And I did forget, just put like a light center line. Don't do it very dark though, very lightly. You're going to follow that shadow down that line. And then we've got our base shadows. Now I like to add a couple more base shadows beyond what the picture shows because we're going to be shading them in anyways. So on the top lip at the very top, follow down that line, leave a little bit of a space, and then continue and do the other top too. Now from here, we kind of juggle between adding texture and adding shading. That way at no point are we adding too much shading at once or too much texture at once, because they work together to kind of create the surface of the lips. So first we're going to add a little bit of texture right now. Now when we're doing this, the lines need to come out from the midline. So I'm gonna just like show you without drawing them first. So your movement should be like this. So you're coming out from that center. So on the right side, you go out and to the right. On the left side, you go out and to the left. Same with the top, you go up and to the right or up and to the left. So first we're just gonna do some short lines, some long lines. So for the shadows that are already there, we're basically just gonna put lines over those first. Again, just quick little texture lines. Do not draw them hard, because then they will kind of overpower the shading. So just really subtle lines there. Next, we're gonna add an additional layer of shading. So we're gonna push the shadows that are already there, and then we're going to add some more middle tones in beyond what we have. So right now we just have shadows and we have the highlight. So now we're going to add everything in between. So we're gonna push these shadows a little bit darker in the corners and along that midline. Don't worry if you're kind of losing the midline. We're gonna go back over it to delineate it again in a second here. So basically everything you already shaded a little bit darker. And then beyond those areas, start shading kind of those middle tones. Again, you should still be using scumbling or feathering, so those circular or oval movements, so that you're not creating scribbles or flattening it out. And then same on the bottom, just pushing those shadows a little bit more. You can see, we can still see those texture marks we made a little bit. We're gonna be adding more. But like I said, it's just a juggle between the two so that you don't add too much of either one. We're gonna go in and start adding those middle grays. On the bottom lip, you wanna leave kind of a highlight here and here. You can still shade there, just definitely shade very lightly. That helps make it look like your lips actually have form to them. And if you're to this point, then you can go back over that midline and make it a nice crisp line again. Now after this point, we're gonna just add one more layer of texture lines. Maybe a little bit longer than last time. But again, still pretty lightly. Now obviously in the areas that are darker, you can push a little harder so that the lines still show, but you never want it to overpower the shading. It should just add to it. The last thing is shading all the skin around, which we should be able to finish with the time left. So first we're gonna start with the Cupid's bow above, and you're gonna kind of shade a U shape at first. And then start shading inside of it. Not too dark though, you don't want it quite as dark as the lips. And leave a little bit of a gap on each side, like very small though. Just enough to where you can see it's lighter between. Then usually I don't shade down this way because I find that it almost makes you shade too dark if you go down rather than if you're shading up. So now what I usually do is jump down to where we had that pinch, keep my pencil at an angle, and just shade lightly up toward that center point. And you can shade out. And same on the other side. And the last part is the shadow below. Now the shadow below, you want to leave a little bit of a highlight gap there. So when I say like a highlight or halo, if you think back to when we were shading the sphere, it's when the light kind of curves around that form and hits the surface one more time. So that's what's kind of happening here. I'll come up a little bit each way. And similar to how we shaded up here, I start back up at the corners and then just lightly bring that shading down. And same on that other side. And then you've got your mouth finished. How do you guys feel you did on that one? Once you're done, I'm sure you might still be shading a little bit, but let me know how you think you did on that one.